Hello everybody and welcome to this 9th Learn Danish tutorial. My name is Emily and today I'll learn you how to mention dates from the Gregorian calendar system in Danish. When it comes to the mentioning of periods of time that pass through a year in days, weeks and months, then here in Denmark we follow the Gregorian calendar system. This means, among other things, that we have 12 months within a year and 7 days within a week in Denmark. In this tutorial, I'll teach you both how to pronounce the Danish names for the months and the weekdays, but also how to properly mention a date in Danish. Now, let us begin. January. In Danish we call it januar. 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 February. In Danish we call it februar. 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 March. In Danish we call it marts. 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 April. In Danish we call it april. 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 May. In Danish we call it maj. 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 June. In Danish we call it juni. 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 July. In Danish we call it juli. 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 August. In Danish we call it august. 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 September. In Danish we call it September. 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 October. In Danish we call it Oktober. 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 November. In Danish we call it November. 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 December. In Danish we call it December. 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 Monday. In Danish we call it mandag. 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 Tuesday. In Danish we call it tirsdag. 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 Wednesday. In Danish we call it onsdag. 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 Thursday. In Danish we call it torsdag. 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 Friday. In Danish we call it fredag. 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 Saturday. In Danish we call it lørdag. 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 Sunday. In Danish we call it søndag. 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 In English, or perhaps especially in American, when you're mentioning a date, you always write it down like this. First, you mention the year. Secondly, you mention the month. And number third, you mention the day of the month. Then in the end, you will end up having a date which looks like the one that has been written down below. 2014/4/16, which finally give us the date, April the 16th of the year 2014. In Danish, you mention a date in the exact opposite way of the English method. Therefore, you'll write it down like this. First, you mention the day. Secondly, you mention the month. And number third, you mention the year. Then you will end up having a date which looks like the one that has been written down below. 16/4/2014, which finally give us the date, April the 16th of the year 2014. If you translate that into Danish, it will sound like this. 16. april 2014. 16. april 2014. 16. april 2014. Then of course, there are some certain rules on how to pronounce a specific date in both English and in Danish. The rules differ from language to language, and therefore I'll list them for you now. In English, when you write down a date number, you always add a suffix behind the number. This suffix consists of 2 letters, which can be like the ones mentioned in the example above. 16th with the suffix th, third with the suffix rd, second with the suffix nd, and first with the suffix st. However, this is not the case in Danish, because here we've chosen to replace that suffix with a dot instead. Therefore, in English, the suffix in a numeral word will correspond to the Danish dot behind the date number. So if you translate the mentioned dates in the above example into Danish, the date numbers will sound like this. 16th corresponds to 16. 16. 16. Third corresponds to tredje. 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 Second corresponds to anden. 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 And first corresponds to første. 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 Also, when you write down a date in English, the mentioned month is always beginning with a capital letter. But in Danish, that rule is not applied, since you on all occasions will have to write down the mentioned month with a non-capital letter. April the 16th. In Danish we call it 16. april. 16. april. 16. april. January the 1st. In Danish we call it 1. januar. 1. januar. 1. januar. July the 2nd. In Danish we call it 2. juli. 2. juli. 2. juli. February the 28th. In Danish we call it 28. februar. 28. februar. 28. februar. November the 3rd. In Danish we call it 3. november. 3. november. 3. november. In some cases, you have to mention a date only in numbers, which often happens when you have to remember a specific memorial date, such as the September 11th attacks upon the World Trade Center in the city of New York in 2001. That particular date will often be mentioned as 9/11 in English, and in Danish you may also mention a date like this, but as I've told you before, you will have to mention the day first and then secondly mention the month. Therefore, 9/11 will sound like this in Danish. 11. i 9. 11. i 9. 11. i 9. If you could translate that Danish expression directly into English, it would sound like this: 11th of the 9th. The number 11 indicates the 11th day of the month, while the number 9 indicates the 9th month of the year, which in this case is September. Now let's continue with some other examples of this topic. 11/6. In Danish we call it 6. i 11. 6. i 11. 6. i 11. 8/12. In Danish we call it 12. i 8. 12. i 8. 12. i 8. 3/19. In Danish we call it 19. i 3. 19. i 3. 19. i 3. 12/31. In Danish we call it 31. i 12. 31. i 12. 31. i 12. 5/7. In Danish we call it 7. i 5. 7. i 5. 7. i 5. Here are some another useful facts to know when it comes to the naming of the seasons in Danish. Number 1. Spring. In Danish we call it forår. 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 Number 2. Summer. In Danish we call it sommer. 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 Number 3. Autumn. In Danish we call it efterår. 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 Number 4. Winter. In Danish we call it vinter. 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 Leap year. In Danish we call it skudår. 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 And finally, we have some useful sentences which can be used to ask about or to mention a date in the company of a Danish-speaking person. Excuse me, what date is it? Undskyld mig, hvilken dato er det? Undskyld mig, hvilken dato er det? Undskyld mig, hvilken dato er det? It's April the 16th. Det er den 16. april. Det er den 16. april. Det er den 16. april. Excuse me, what day is it? Undskyld mig, hvilken dag er det? Undskyld mig, hvilken dag er det? It's Wednesday. Det er onsdag. Det er onsdag. Det er onsdag. Excuse me, what month is it? Undskyld mig, hvilken måned er vi i? Undskyld mig, hvilken måned er vi i? Undskyld mig, hvilken måned er vi i? We are in the month of April. Vi er i måneden april. Vi er i måneden april. Vi er i måneden april. Excuse me, what type of season are we in? Undskyld mig, hvilken årstid har vi nu? Undskyld mig, hvilken årstid har vi nu? Undskyld mig, hvilken årstid har vi nu? It's springtime. Det er forår. Det er forår. Det er forår. Well, everybody, that's all for this tutorial. Thanks for watching, and I hope I'll see you again soon in another Learn Danish tutorial. Take care.